All right, you're working on, I think, some of the most fundamental changes that we're going to witness in America. One of those is reforming our counterintelligence evidence so we're not abusing Americans, but actually focused on the real threats like terrorists and foreign spies. Tell us what's key to the effort and what you're working on right now.
Well, I think we have to sort of reposture. We've been in this sort of post-Cold War, pre-9/11 type of posture. And what we know is that our adversaries are very aggressive and are outpacing us with counterintelligence threats and stealing our secrets. They're taking advantage of our open society. And what we know is that we just need to adopt, in my opinion, a whole of government approach across the enterprise of the IC and law enforcement. We bring that together, and we think we can achieve a much better, more robust effort on counterintelligence. And here's what I would say is that Kash Patel and company, the FBI, have done a tremendous job, and particularly lately, apprehending some pretty bad actors. As we've seen, some of these things have materialized. For example, the threats with regard to Michigan military base, where you had some Chinese property owners adjacent to a military installation. We saw another issue where the U.S. Secret Service intercepted at the an attempt to hack phone systems at the UN General Assembly. And there's a whole host of other issues where the FBI has really stepped up and made those apprehensions. But where we think we can help that is in the non-apprehension, the non-arrest state of counterintelligence. That is, sometimes we have agencies that are really, really good at counterintelligence. They don't have necessarily the law enforcement authority, but they're really good at exploiting networks and maybe even turning some assets, maybe doing some better work that helps protect Americans, American assets, military secrets, things of this nature, and also gives us a better insight into how those nations are positioned here at home. And that might not necessarily end up in an arrest. It might help us to exploit an existing network and give us better insights into, say, for example, China or Russia that are operating here really with impunity because of our open society. They use that against us. And so what we're proposing is that we augment the FBI and increase their bandwidth to address these counterintelligence threats. We think that's a really good way to help shore up one of the biggest vulnerabilities that we have, and it is really the result of our free and open society. And you have countries like China and Russia and Iran and others that are really good at exploiting that and turning it against us.
Yeah. And more, I've covered the intelligence community for about 35 years as a journalist. In the last year or two, I've heard so much more concern that there are domestic interests here, and they play out with protests and activities, but they may have an increasing alliance with our enemies overseas. Are you seeing more Iran, China, Venezuela, Russia, and bad actors like that, North Korea, engaging with American assets and trying to use them as proxies on our soil?
Yeah, I think there is a whole network of both state and non-state actors that bring that to bear here in the United States. That is to exploit any kind of political divide that might exist or schisms that may exist in even within a political party. So they kind of help sow discord. We've seen malign influence from state actors that include China and Russia and Iran. But then there's also the non-state actor that can be doing the bidding of a nation state. For example, what if you had, let's say Russia was essentially paying for cyber attacks against certain targets, or that China might be doing the same thing. China might be mobilizing diaspora that lives here in the United States, maybe United States citizens, but they have this underlying allegiance to the mother country, and China seeks to exploit that. We need to know about it. We need to be in a position to intercept those kinds of things and protect our citizens here at home. And we can broaden our scope and bring in a lot of expertise that provides a good level of augmentation to what the FBI is already doing.
Some of these lights were blinking red for a long time, but the Biden administration really turned a blind eye to it. And a lot of people say to me today, when President Trump took over in January, we were very close to being blind to a 9/11 scale sort of intelligence failure. Were we that close, and are we tightening the gaps quickly with the changes that people like Kash Patel and John Ratcliffe and Pam Bondi are making?
Yeah, I couldn't speculate on how close we are to a 9/11 type incident, because honestly, I don't know what the next 9/11 looks like. I'm concerned about that because I can't what we saw with 9/11 was essentially a failure of imagination. Who would have ever thought that people would fly planes into buildings and kill, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 people? Who would have ever thought that? We weren't thinking like that. And so we've got to sort of retrain ourselves and ask the questions, what would we do if we had all these resources at our disposal and we wanted to potentially take down a nation, or even to degrade a nation to a point that we elevate ourselves to a preeminent status economically, militarily, politically, whatever? What would we do? I don't think we're asking all the questions that we should, and I don't think we're getting the answers because the appropriate questions aren't being asked. And so I think we need to be careful that we don't lapse into a pre-9/11 state of malaise, that we're always vigilant, hyper vigilant to threats, and red teaming ourselves constantly with the most creative thinkers we can to really challenge our national security experts on what we need to do to protect the American people.